Well, I'm glad to be here, obviously. Of course, at my age, I'm glad to be anywhere. And I do want to thank the managers of Politics and Prose, Bradley Graham and his wife, Lissa Muscatine. They own the store, and I appreciate the opportunity to come back after 12 years. It's been an interesting 12 years, renewing the book time after time. I also want to thank two people who helped with the book, including my friend and researcher Patty Cloyne, sitting right over here, and she's a terrific researcher, and my friend Jack May. He's a financial planner, and believe it or not, he has helped me on every one of the 4 editions, so that's many years of help, and I thank you for that. Also, I want to thank Susan Bick from 5 Star, who made it possible for many of my neighbors at the 5 Star residence in Chevy Chase to be here today. One of the 12 decisions in the book is where do I want to live after I retire? And I listened to my friends talking about retirement and talking about where they want to live. And it seems like a lot of them are moving to Florida or Arizona or California. And sometimes it sounds pretty glamorous. And because they're moving to those golf course communities that are pretty lavish. And whenever I go to those places, they remind me of the story about John and Mary Smith. He was 95, she was 90, and by coincidence, they passed away on the same day. So naturally, they arrived at the pearly gates together. And God thought they had been very good people on earth, so he decided to give them a tour of heaven. God took them to show them the beautiful mansion in which they were going to live. Then he took them to see the championship golf course, and then the Olympic-sized swimming pool, and finally the wonderful dining room in the clubhouse. And at each stop, John would say to God, "This is wonderful, but what does it cost to live here?" And God said, "Well, nothing at all. It's free. After all, this is heaven." Finally, John turned to Mary and said, "You know, Mary, this is all your fault." "What's my fault?" Mary asked. "Well," John said, "if it wasn't for you and all those vitamins, I could have been here years ago." Let me tell you a little bit about how I happen to be standing here today talking about retirement, a very unlikely event if you look back a few years. I've spent most of my life, as Bradley said, in the newspaper business as a reporter, editor, and columnist. And in 1996, I was working at the Washington Post in the financial section, writing 2 columns a week about stocks and about mutual funds. Also, often writing daily stories about what had happened in the market that day. And it was a busy life, and frankly, I never gave any thought to retirement. But when I got to be 69, my wife Sarah and I started to talk about maybe taking some trips. And she had already retired from General Electric, so that left it up to me to think about retirement. And it seemed to be a good idea to maybe just start doing that traveling while we were still healthy, because we had made a few trips, and we'd seen a lot of people who were in the advanced stage who were having trouble getting up the hills. Well, one day I walked into the office of David Ignatius. He was then the business editor at the Washington Post. And I told him I had decided to retire after 23 years at the Post. He said he was sorry to see me leave, and then he asked me a question. The question was, when you retire, would you be willing to write 1 column a month for me? Well, that sure sounded easy. It wasn't easy, but it sounded that way. But I said to him, "David, what do you want me to write about?" And he said, "I'm looking for somebody to write a first-person column about what it's like to retire. I want to call it Retirement Journal. Are you interested?" Well, I was interested, and I accepted the job. And I did it for 7 years, actually, afterwards. But in the beginning, when I had to write the first column, it turned out to be, I found, the most amazing assignment of my entire career. I thought I had known a lot about the financial markets and consequently would know a lot about retirement. It turned out not to be true, not at all. Retirement, the field of retirement, was a whole different thing and very strange. And it had all these strange names like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and on and on and on. And I realized very quickly that I knew nothing about those particular subjects. Worse yet, I soon discovered that I had made a number of mistakes in my own retirement because I had not done my homework and was not prepared to make some of those important retirement decisions. What were those mistakes? Well, I took my Social Security too soon. I took my pension in a way that left no benefit for my wife when I died, and I mishandled the investments in my own 401k plan at the Post, and that cost me, I later figured out, about $70,000 in retirement money. Well, I finally understood how ill-prepared I was for retirement. And that's when I asked myself, I wonder how many other people are in the same boat. So I decided to write a book that would help people kind of understand the ins and outs of retirement. And the more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that the key to a successful retirement is preparation. You know, if you were planning to go to Europe, you wouldn't just go down the airport, buy a ticket, and hop on a plane. No, you wouldn't do that. You'd prepare for your trip. You'd buy some guidebooks, check on the weather, the local currency. You'd put together an itinerary so you'd know where you were going and what you were going to do when you got there. Clearly, when it comes to retirement, the slogan that works best is preparedness is next to godliness. Well, as we've mentioned, the book deals with 12 decisions that you should make, but we can't really cover them all today, so I'm going to take just 3 of those decisions. The first one is, am I ready to retire? Now, why is this an important question? It seems like it wouldn't be, but it is. It's important because the decision to retire is, in many ways, a life-changing event. One day, you're a hard-working person with a busy job, lots of responsibilities. You're surrounded by colleagues and friends that you may have known for years. So you go to your retirement party the next day, you find you're home alone, and all of that activity and responsibility is gone. It's disappeared. That may feel good for a while, but if that feeling could wear off quite easily, particularly if you're really not ready for retirement. So I say before you quit your job, it might be wise to ask yourself, am I really ready to retire? And to find out if you are. Well, how do you know? How do you know if you're ready? I can give you a couple examples. I can give you 2 in favor of retiring, particularly what I call the time is right. You know, if you can look in the mirror and say to yourself, I've worked for 30 years, I've met every challenge that life has thrown at me, but I've reached the point where I want time for myself. These years belong to me. If that's how you feel, and if you can afford to retire, you've got a perfectly good reason to do so. Another good reason to retire is you've got more important things to do. I have a friend by the name of Jane who worked for a federal agency for many years. She was a woman devoted to her church and devoted to her faith, and service to her community was really the cornerstone of her life. She knew that when she retired, she wanted to find a way to help other people. She was interested in helping senior citizens because she said she'd found that a lot of churches do activities for youth and for married couples, but not a lot for senior citizens. So she decided to form a group of volunteers to provide the support that many frail seniors need to stay connected to the community. She took early retirement from the government, found a church that liked her ideas, and she and her husband moved to another town so that she could pursue her goals. Jane told me she did not regret retiring early because she felt she had more important things to do with the rest of her life than doing the job that she'd been doing for so many years. Well, those are 2 reasons for not for retiring. Now, what about reasons for not retiring? Well, one reason is you like working and you don't have anything you'd rather do. Lots of people feel that way, particularly my friend Bert Ely. You may have read about him or heard of him. He's 70 years old. He's a well-known consultant in the banking field in Washington. And he loves his work, and he loves being, what he says, in the loop. And he's run his own business for 30 years, and he tells me he doesn't ever plan to retire. Another reason for not retiring, perhaps, is you'll miss the people you work with. That sounds kind of strange, but it's true sometimes. I know when I retired from the Washington Post, what I figured out was that I didn't miss all those heart-stopping deadlines that we had every day. But what I did miss, and didn't miss my work, what I missed was my workplace. In other words, I missed the gossip and the jokes and all the talk on Monday morning about what to do with the Washington Redskins. And many of my fellow retirees tell me that they too, even now in retirement, sort of miss the social life in the office. Well, the second decision, a very big decision, is can you afford to retire? When you begin to ask yourself that question, what you got to do is sit down and make up a retirement budget, which is different than most budgets. And you've got to do it even if it's only temporary, because you may still have 4 or 5 years to go. But you got to do it. And what you need to do is find out whether your monthly income in retirement is going to cover your monthly expenses. You add up all the money you'll get from Social Security and pensions and from your investments each month. Then you add up all your expenses: housing, food, clothing, transportation, insurance, travel, and entertainment. Boy, there sure are a lot of expenses. And then if you have enough income to cover your expenses, well, that's just great. But if it's clear you'll fall short, you've got to find other ways to make ends meet. You can increase your income, perhaps, by working part-time, or you can try to lower your expenses. I got to tell you, I've tried it. It's not easy to do. And if you can't do either, your next step is to see how much you can withdraw from your savings. But if you take out too much, you'll reduce the amount of money that your savings can earn. And many experts, like Jack here, suggest that you limit your withdrawals to maybe 4 or 5% a year. Just remember that there's a pretty good chance that your savings are going to have to support you in retirement for 15 or 20 years or hopefully more. Well, meanwhile, while you're trying to figure out that about whether or not you've got enough income to cover your expenses, let me tell you some of the financial surprises that I ran into when I retired. I was really amazed when I talked about how it was an amazing job. It was amazing to discover I didn't know all this. When Sarah and I were working, we took home 2 paychecks. When we retired, we began living on a fixed income with Social Security, our pensions, and the money we could withdraw from savings. I did not anticipate how different life would be when those paychecks stopped coming. When you're working, you can always hope for a raise. Perhaps you can work overtime, or once in a while you might even get a bonus. But when you're retired and you're on a fixed income, you can forget about those extra sources of money. Second surprise was about health insurance. At the Post and the GE, Sarah and I held health insurance from our employers, very good health insurance. It covered dental coverage. It covered all the cost of prescription drugs. Of course, when we retired, we lost our company health insurance. So like 44 million other people, we went on Medicare, which doesn't pay for dental care and only pays a portion of prescription drugs. In addition, we also had to spend money to buy a secondary insurance policy or a Medigap policy, which I know that many of you have. In all, the bottom line was that our health care expenses in retirement were much more than they were when we were working. The third surprise, Sarah and I had saved for retirement by putting money in our 401k plans at work. This was a wonderful way to save, particularly because when you put the money in, it was not taxed, and even the company match was not taxed. But sooner or later, you have to pay the piper, and when you get to be 70 and a half, you have to start taking money out of those accounts. And every penny you take out is 100% taxable. I didn't really think about that, I guess, at the time, because I began running short of money, and I kept trying to figure out why. Then I found out why. Because of every dollar I took out, I had to take 30 or 40 cents more just to pay the taxes. So that is really something when you plan your retirement budget to make sure that you've accounted for. The fourth surprise is, and you will often hear from financial planners and other people, that you need 70 to 80% of your working income to support you in retirement. Well, the truth is that may work for some people, but it didn't work for us. If anything, our expenses in retirement went up, and I'll tell you why. We wanted to travel. We wanted to take vacations. We wanted to go to shows at the Kennedy Center and eat in restaurants. In short, we had worked for 40 years, and we decided it was time to have some fun. But fun costs money. And don't forget, when you're making up your retirement budget, to put in some money for fun. Decision 3. When should you take your Social Security retirement benefits? I must tell you, many people are confused by this question. So here's the story on Social Security in a nutshell. All through your working life, the Social Security computers keep track of how much you earn. When you tell them you want to retire, the computers will look at your earnings for the highest 35 years, and they'll tell you how much money you're going to get in benefits each month. That figure will be based on what's called the full retirement age. That age is now 66 for anyone born between 1943 and 1954. And the full retirement age, incidentally, is on its way up to 67 in a few more years. Well, when it comes to retirement benefits, Social Security very kindly will give you some options. They'll let you take your benefits at any time between 62 and 70. But if you take your benefits at 62, your monthly payments are going to be reduced. And if you wait to 70, your benefits will be increased. So what's the best thing to do? A lot of people, as I say, are confused about that. It all depends on how you feel about working, on your health, and on your need for income. For instance, if you know that when you retire, you're going to need the maximum benefit, the maximum income you can get, then you should wait to the age 70 to claim your benefits. Meanwhile, there's one more thing you should know about Social Security that might surprise you. If you take your benefits before full retirement age and you continue to work and earn money, you will run into what's called the Social Security earnings limitation. That means if you earn more than $15,120 this year in 2013, you'll have to temporarily give back some of your Social Security benefits. That earnings limitation will fortunately go away when you reach full retirement age. But a lot of people are not aware of that and don't account for it before they take their benefits. Finally, the third decision I'd like to talk about is the one, what should I do to prepare for an illness that requires long-term care? Of all the 12 decisions in my book, this one, for me, is the most personal. As many of you know, my wife Sarah, to whom I've been married for 60 years, is afflicted with Alzheimer's disease and resides in a small nursing home. As you might imagine, this episode in our life has been extremely traumatic. Alzheimer's disease attacks not only the patient, but the patient's family members as well. It makes huge demands on the time, energy, and financial resources of family members. It also forever changes their future hopes and plans. 12 years ago, the reason I wrote How to Retire Happy, as I said, was to help people prepare for retirement. That's still my purpose. However, after my experience with Sarah's illness, I wondered, what can I tell people that would help them prepare for this kind of serious illness in their family? Frankly, I had to admit that I didn't have a lot of good answers. Maybe there is no real way to prepare for this kind of event. However, in the book, I have tried to tell readers how and where to find help, how to select an assisted living facility if they need one, and what they should know about the cost of long-term care and long-term care insurance. Fortunately, Sarah and I do have long-term care insurance because the Washington Post offered it to its employees many years ago. In conclusion, I want to tell you about a public opinion poll which asked senior citizens about the quality of their lives. More than 50% of the people said, "This is the best time of my life." I was really glad to see that because it indicated to me that many people do find both happiness and satisfaction in retirement. But I must tell you, that feeling of satisfaction won't suddenly hit you like a bolt of lightning. Indeed, it's a feeling that will develop slowly as retirement begins to reshape your life. Many of us think of retirement as a single big event in our lives, but it's really more than that. And adjusting to retirement is a process that takes time and patience. It is, however, a process that will change your life, your goals, your ambitions, your habits, and even your relationships to your spouse, your children, and grandchildren. I'm not saying that retirement will make you a different person. It won't. But it will give you a different way of looking at your life. In fact, it can even give you a second life, with many opportunities to do things you could never do before. It also will give you the opportunity to decide what in life is most important to you, and better yet, it will give you the time to do something about it. Thank you very much.